Welcome to the Move In Mindset. On today's episode, we will be addressing common questions as it pertains to credit and the mortgage process. Okay, Mark, top 10 credit questions to ask your mortgage lender. Question number one: what credit score do I need to qualify for a mortgage?
Thank you, Karen. Yes, our VA mortgage solution has no minimum credit score,
Okay.
although we do look at the last 12 months of credit history to make sure that they qualify for VA. FHA, we underwrite all the way to 500, but I encourage folks to be at least 580 or above. Why? Because at 580 or above, they can get 3.5% down versus under 580, they need 10% down. And on conventional loan, typically you need 620 or above to qualify for their programs. Karen, borrowers often ask me, how does their credit score affect their interest rates?
Well, credit score is the number one indication of where you're going to fall from an interest rate perspective because your credit score is tied to how you pay your lenders. The higher credit scores indicate lower risk, which means lenders are going to be more inclined to give you a lower interest rate. So the lower the credit score goes, the higher the interest rate typically is. And reason being is because those with the lower credit scores or the lower risk, the lender wants to earn more money up front because there is a higher indication of default.
Right.
So they want to earn as much money as they can on the front because they lent you that money.
Perfect.
So, Mark, I often have a lot of people who are interested in buying a home concerned about pulling their credit and how it will impact their credit scores. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely, Karen. We're pulling the credit score, and it's kind of a maybe. It can impact their credit score, but typically it's only going to be between 5 and 7 points. It's not going to be like most people's concern, is this going to drop my score 10, 20 points? Typically, no. The other thing we encourage people to do is if they're going to shop for a mortgage, to do all that within a very narrow time frame. And what is that? That's within a week. Therefore, the systems that we're pulling this data from understand that the borrower is literally shopping for a mortgage so that the score impact is minimal.
So, can you explain to our viewers the difference between a soft credit pull and a hard inquiry?
Yeah, and a soft credit pull, typically when we're doing a soft pull, we're only getting information from one credit bureau versus what we call a tri-merged or hard pull, where we get it from all three credit bureaus. And why do we want that? Because there's information on a different bureau that may not be on that one bureau that we get. So therefore, we get a better picture and a more inclusive picture of all the elements that are on their credit that we may need to address during our review.
Correct. So, what I typically encourage my clients to allow me to do is a hard pull. And the reason that I do that is because I don't want to pre qualify them off a soft pull. We move down the process to pre approval. And then once we get that hard pull, something shows up that impacts everything that we've talked about. So, if you are shopping for a home, I encourage people let the lender do a hard pull.
Yep, absolutely. I agree. Karen, often we have borrowers that want to know which credit bureaus are we getting information from?
So we typically will get a tri-merge, but that question in itself is not all is just not a one answer question because in a previous Q&A question we talked about hard pulls versus soft pulls. A soft pull is only one bureau, whereas a hard pull is all three bureaus. We have your Equifax, your TransUnion, and your Experian. And as a lender, we're always going to use the middle of those three scores to determine what credit we're going to use to qualify you. So we will ultimately pull a tri-merge in the qualifying process. So typically when we're interviewing someone who is interested in buying and we're talking about credit, one of the number one questions that they ask is what items on my credit report could prevent me from getting approved? Can you speak to that?
Absolutely, Karen. Typically, the most impactful thing is going to be a recent late payment. The others, charge-offs and collections, I'll speak to those in a minute. But a recent late payment, it means that you in the last 3 to 6 months didn't pay something on time. Charge-offs are where the creditor has already written that off, and potentially we may not need to address that, but sometimes we need to if that charge-off was within the last 12 months.
Correct.
And a collection is basically where either the creditor is trying to collect the debt still, or it's been transferred to a credit agency who's collecting on behalf of that creditor who's issued that. And in that event, we need to either negotiate to pay the thing off in full or a portion of that, and potentially even over time. That's why we always encourage people to come to us early so that we can work on some of these items that may impact their ability to buy.
Absolutely, because credit is all about risk.
Correct. Karen, occasionally borrowers will come to us and they don't have credit scores or they have very little credit. Talk to me about how we make sure those folks get approved as well.
So someone with thin credit or no credit can still get approved for a home loan. It really depends on what program they're seeking for financing. So when someone has no credit, what we generally will ask for are 2 to 3 alternative trade lines, because the lender wants to see that you have had some type of credit ties or some type of payment history with someone, not necessarily your typical creditors like a credit card, card note, things like that. So what an alternative trade is a 12-month history on how you've paid your car insurance, how you paid your light bill, how you paid your water bill, your cable, things of that nature. So if you have thin credit or no credit, we want alternative trade lines, 2 or 3. If you don't have those, that means you're kind of off the grid from a credit perspective. That's the only time you typically will see someone not being able to get qualified if they have no credit footprint at all. But most people will have a cell phone, they'll have car insurance, life insurance, and they can use that history to get approved for a home loan.
Great.
All right, Mark. Question number 7. Should I pay off debt or collections before applying for a mortgage? This is a tough one because you'll get different answers depending on who you ask.
Absolutely. And as we talked about in an earlier reel where they were talking about charge-offs and collections, this kind of is the same thing. We want to make sure that when the borrower comes to that, number one, they come to us early in the process. Number two, that gives us an opportunity to actually quantify what they need to pay off and what they don't need to pay off. Typically, though, the impact of that credit is going to be over a longer period of time. So when people say, hey, I just paid this off, number one, probably hasn't been reported to the credit bureaus. And typically that takes between 60 and 90 days to show up before it really has any impact. So again, we want to make sure that any debts that are on their credit report that we want to address, we address those as early as possible, because the impact is not going to be immediate. It's going to be over time.
Right. And I think when people have come to us and we're looking at their credit, I think sometimes potential home buyers don't necessarily understand that what they've done may not necessarily impact whether or not they get approved. So when we talk about coming to a lender and having a consultation early, we say that because we don't want you doing unnecessary things that could because addressing things on your credit sometimes can negatively impact. And we want you to only do the things, if applicable, that we direct you to do. So again, don't do anything until you talk to a lender. Even if you think you got good credit, don't do anything. Let the lender guide you when it comes to paying off collections and or charge-offs.
Great point. Karen, from time to time, people ask about negative items on their credit report and how long do they stay on their credit report?
Well, typically with something negative, because this is what I think is more of the direct question. Something negative being on the credit report, because as long as you have an open credit card that's revolving, you're going to keep paying. It'll stay on for as long as you have it, right? But as far as negative credit, typically we see a window of 7 years, and then you would think it would fall off, and in some instances it does. But with collections, I'll just talk about collections really quickly specifically. Collections can be sold and sold and sold to different credit agencies in an attempt to still get paid, right? So you will see those things potentially stay on longer than 7 years. So if you have an outstanding collection, I would highly encourage you to pay it. Work with the most recent agency that has it. Work out some type of either payment arrangement or one-time settlement to get it removed. Because reality is The only thing that is going to fall off your credit is that which has a zero balance.
Absolutely.
Because there's nothing else to report. There's no activity. So collections pay off. Charge-offs, I don't encourage people to pay those unless they turn into a judgment. So you got to know what type of debt it is that was charged off, because some of those creditors can take you to court, right? They want that money, especially if Navy Federal, you got $25,000 from them on a credit card. They're not so quick to walk away despite a charge-off. But yeah, that's typically 7 years. Even with bankruptcies, judgments can stay on there for as long as you haven't paid it.
Good counsel.
All right, Mark. What do I do if I find errors on my credit report? Should I fix them before applying?
Well, again, it really talks about the time frame. So if you're looking to buy in the next 90 days, probably not going to really fix them. If you give us the 3 to 6 months that we encourage people to do, then absolutely. Because if there are any errors on your credit report, we want to make sure those come off, because those can have a negative effect to your credit score. So yes, you want to go ahead and address those, especially if anything's in error on your credit report. And again, you want to make sure that anything that you resolve, you get it in writing, because sometimes these things can be addressed and they can be resolved, but then they can reappear. But by having that documentation, we get what's known as a credit supplement, so that our underwriters aren't considering those negatives onto your credit report.
So once again, timing is everything in this process. Like you said, you could think that you've gotten something resolved and it either did not come off the credit report as you anticipated, or it came off and it came back, right? Like for example, let's say you paid off a collection and now you apply for a home loan. And we're saying, hey, yeah, I see you have a collection in your credit report. And you're like, no, I paid that off. But we're trying to go into contract. Like, you see a house that you're ready to buy. Now we have to stop and make sure that we address that when we could have just moved on down the train track. So once again, guys, timing is everything.
Karen, borrowers come to us and they want to know, can they improve their credit quickly before applying or closing on a loan?
Okay, so the quick answer to that is no. And I'm going to say no, because when it comes to addressing fixes on credit or improving credit quickly, that's the thing.
Ain't no
Nothing in the credit world is quickly, unless we're utilizing some tools as a lender called a rapid rescore, and that is costly because we're going to defer that cost to the buyer. We will use that tool if someone is just a few points away and we've identified some things that they can do. But also this question is for people who actually have credit. If you don't have any credit, there's nothing you can do quickly, because most lenders want to see a 12-month credit history, or, like we spoke before, alternative trade lines. But if you have credit, the word quickly should not even be in our vocabulary unless we're using a tool to impact the credit scores. Let's say specifically there's a program that you want to qualify for that offers some type of down payment assistance, and they have a minimum credit score. Those are the times where we'll want to use some type of rapid rescore. But doing it on your own, there's no such thing as quickly. And once we in contract, we're locking that interest rate. So improving your score before closing, to me, is not something that we're going to do, because we want to lock the rate, because we don't know what this market is going to do.
Absolutely.
Right? So while we're waiting for your credit to potentially improve, your rate could be impacted, which could impact your loan altogether. So I don't play we're going to work on credit before closing. We're going to work on credit before we go under contract.
Absolutely, yeah.
If we want to move quickly, we use a credit rescore tool.
Thank you.
We don't leave it to the buyers.
Thank you for joining us for the Q&A on credit today. Please feel free to comment or reach out to any one of us if you have questions or would like to be approved for a mortgage, so we can help you have the move-in mindset too.